Hola Bandidos, ¿cómo estamos? Welcome to Mel's Magic Official. I'm Magic Mel, and this is my angel Charles. Welcome to episode 14 of season 11. I'm taking a deep breath. There's a lot of ground to be covered. I want to call this episode an opportunity and a call to evolve. You know, as my personal background, I grew up in I'd say, tri-cultural environment. My father was German, my mother was from the Philippines, and I grew up in Germany and then in Spain, and then lived in 6 countries. I am beyond the national identity discourse, which I struggled with a long time. Now I prefer to look at my own cultural and biological makeup and see what are the similarities and what are the differences. I love doing that. I like to take the overview and see and compare. And at this point, I identify as a human being. I would like to take the human vision, the human perspective on what's going on within me and what's going on around me. I call this episode a time, an opportunity to evolve, because it's so blatant for us to see. You know, I speak to you here about healing and the importance of our healing. I try to link the importance of our personal story with the wider myth, that now we have the opportunity to write a new story as humankind, the human race, because we are in the transition of ages. I also see played out now a really systemic form of mind control that keeps us looping in a trauma cycle. And this has special importance because if we look at epigenetics, epigenetics proves to us that we are influenced by our environment. So our well-being or our dis-ease is very much influenced by how our environment is either conducive to that well-being or counters that well-being and brings us dis-ease on a cellular level. And I'm drawing the line towards epigenetics because we live in a traumatizing society, guys. I don't know a lot of people who have not either been directly traumatized or through the system traumatized. There's obviously a lot of people who are in direct conflict zones, and then there's us, trying to go about our lives. But even that seems very difficult because what we have normalized is just familiar and is actually, dare I say, insane and sick. We suffer from a huge soul sickness where the very expression of our soul has been repressed. But we're tapping back into that. We're tapping back into our divinity, that spark of divinity that we carry within us. And it's liberating us. It's spreading individually and into the collective. So there's a stark contrast between an old way of being and a new way of being. And the shadows, the darkness that we weren't able to see before, maybe as clearly, because we were so immersed by our own darkness, are now more visible because we can discern the darkness. Why? Because we're tapping back into our light. Let's remember that the darkness only exists when there's no light. So with our healing work, with our raising of our own frequency, with us tapping back into our personal truth, with us reconnecting from a dissociated mind back with our whole being, our body's wisdom, our body's compass, our feelings, our heart's wisdom, our gut instincts. By us healing, i.e., reclaiming those soul fragments, we're able to see clearer. Our third eye is opening. So what we were maybe before unconscious of in our own being and in the outside world, we're now becoming conscious of. We're now becoming aware. By us trusting our own body, our own BS filter, by us trusting our gut when we feel something is not sitting well, we're able to see clearer through non-truths, through lies, through deception, and we're able to call it out as an act of self-honoring, boundaries, and as an act of truth-telling. And there is a war of consciousness going on, where our individual healing is becoming of supreme importance. What is becoming more and more obvious to me nowadays is that there are really two major timelines splitting. One leads more and more into oppression, control, repression, fear, aggression. I call it kind of like a death timeline. Or the other one, which is about us evolving as a human being, as a human species, as humankind. One is leading us into more division, more fragmentation, internally and outside, us giving up our own sovereignty, our own authority, our own connection with our own truth, our own humanity, and giving into barbarism and brutality and aggression, our very primitive way of being. And the other one is the more evolved, the compassionate, the one grounded in our divinity, in our real sense of being a human being, in empathy, in collaboration, in creation. And our individual choices are contributing to either one or the other timeline. So us giving up our personal sovereignty, our personal connection with our body, our personal ability to forgive ourselves, our personal healing means we're feeding into the destructive timeline. The new timeline of evolving seems so risky or so scary because we're literally creating something new. The good thing, though, is that this timeline that leads towards evolution is connected with our divinity and with the protection and the guidance of the divine. And you can call it God, you can call it source, you can call it the universe. It is a more soulful, a more spiritful, a more humane way of being. And this trauma-based society very much feeds on our primitive part of the brain, our reptilian brain, that is very much active in us. And the reptilian brain is the part of us, the limbic system, that deals with unconscious processing, digestive, all of the unconscious processing of the body, and also very primitive emotions of aggression, anger, and fear. We have the prefrontal cortex, and I'm not a scientist, look it up. Please do your own research also. I'm actually going to refer to a website that puts it very easy. The prefrontal cortex is like the CEO of the brain, where we can make rational decisions, where we can make conscious decisions, where we can use our imagination. It's the part of the brain that is still growing and evolving. We are an evolving being. It's not done. So the upper part of the brain, the CO part of the brain, is the one that can regulate the primitive brain if the conditions are right. Our primitive brain, our amygdala, gets triggered by stress and by strong emotions. And this is very important to take note of, because the systemic mind control feeds on us staying and acting out from this more primitive part of our brain. The widespread violence, the fear, the revenge, all of that has to do with an environment, being an environment that's constantly stressing us, that's constantly putting us into fight, flight, freeze, which is a very primitive survival response of our brain. So the fact that trauma keeps on being induced on us, it keeps us in this lower frequency, in this lower state of being. For us to access our more evolved parts of the brain, we need to actually feel safe in the body. See the connection going on here? That's why in our own healing, what is so important for us is to be able to regulate our own nervous system that has been stuck and frozen in a survival mode. It's the notion of us being able to self-regulate, to soothe our nervous system, to come back into the parasympathetic nervous system, where we are able to switch into peripheral vision rather than tunnel vision that is associated with survival mode. That's why it's so important for you to create a sense of safety for yourself, to down-regulate your nervous system, to come out of survival mode so that we can access our creative parts of the brain. And if you've watched my past episodes, that is so important because, again, if we're caught in these lower states of being, we cannot really create something new. And what is becoming very obvious, to me at least, is that the system is trying to keep us repressed in this lower state of being. But you cannot stop the evolution of consciousness. It's so obvious because a lot of us are healing, doing the work. A lot of us are aware. A lot of us want something different. It's a matter of creating the right environment for human beings to act out, not from their primal drive of aggression, which we do have, and that is something that needs to be accepted. There is a very much respected performance artist, Marina Abramovic. Please look up her performance called, let me just look at the Rhythm Zero, where she deliberately exposed herself to an audience, and she had 72, I'm just looking at the website. I'll quote all the websites I'm referencing here in the description box so you can also look at them. So she, the performance artist Marina Abramovic, she displayed 72 items for the audience, complete strangers, to employ on her. Some were more conducive for pleasure, some more conducive to pain. As the audience got more and more emboldened, testing her, she ended up, within 3 hours, her clothes being cut off, weapons used to cut her skin, her neck, people drank her blood. I mean, on and on, even somebody holding a loaded pistol to her head. So, I'm quoting here, paraphrasing, by relinquishing all control over her own body, she highlighted how far people would go without the threat of accountability. There are other case studies, and I need to look them up, where normal civilians, people like you and me, given the right permission, are capable of terrible atrocities, guys. So let's not blind ourselves to the very fact that we are capable of committing atrocities, given the right incentive, given the right pretext, given the right environment. This is nothing new. Let's just look at our history. Dare I say, we all have blood on our hands. We've all either been the oppressor or the oppressed. But this vision I have, and not just me, I mean, Eckhart Tolle quoted A New Earth. When was that? Let's look up the book. The notion of the new earth is grounded on the capacity for us to think differently, to imagine differently, to act from a sense of empowerment, from an alignment with our divinity. It comes down to choosing, though, guys, because we all have the devil and the angel on our shoulder. Who do we listen to? I'd also like you to watch the beautiful episode of Eternalized, The Psychology of Angels. I'm going to link it in the description box below. Where this battle between, and I don't like these words, good and evil, but this choice point that's been going on for so long for us human beings to choose, who do we align with? What do we follow? Our conscience, our heart, our higher integrity, or our lower drives has always been there. And it's so important right now to make, I'm not going to say even the right choice, a choice that feels integral, self-honoring, self-loving, and aligned in your personal truth. Because we're all called to make these choices now. Because our choices impact the timeline we are going to fortalecer in Spanish. We are going to strengthen. And our own passivity, our own copping out, our own distraction from this truth is not helping anyone. Not deciding is a choice. And we can choose to not do the work. We can choose not to heal. We can choose to conform. We can choose to stay comfortable. But at what expense? Because at the end of the day, you and I, we're here as an opportunity, as a gift for our soul to grow, for our energy to grow. By that I mean reach a higher frequency. Because that is the only thing we're taking away with us, guys. After this vessel, after leaving this vessel of our skin and flesh, what remains, what goes on is our soul. And we have the choice now to choose from a soulful perspective or to feed into the soul deadening cycle we've been in. Haven't we suffered enough? Haven't we all experienced enough pain to be able to choose a different path, one of well-being? I feel like, in this healing journey, the more we heal at each level, we're given more responsibility. We're giving like a key that unlocks more information because we're actually able to hold more information. That makes us more able to respond rather than to react, because we can see the trigger, we can see our own wounding. We know that where we need to hold more light, bring more light into our own rejected shadow parts. Freedom of choice, that is the cost. The cost and the opportunity at the same time to make wiser decisions that are conducive to our own well-being and those of our reflection in the outer world. because we are all reflections of each other. My personal next level of my healing has to do with actually having interdependent relationships. I want to grow. I choose to grow. Because I know the pain of stagnation. I know the pain of being stuck. I know the pain of resisting. So do we really have a choice? I mean, it's a choice between suffering and evolving. And evolving doesn't mean there's no pain. There's always going to be pain. But the pain will serve us to make even wiser choices as we go on. But let's embrace this journey, which actually does not have to be so filled with suffering, if only we open ourselves up more and trust more. And yes, do the work. Where in myself have I not streamed my own self-love? Where in myself am I still rejecting my own wounding? Where in myself have I not forgiven myself? Where in myself am I still blaming someone else for my own pain and hence holding on to the pain instead of witnessing it and holding space for it and processing it and being courageous and releasing it? You and I know the cost of stuck emotions. They make us sick because they don't go anywhere. Energy doesn't go anywhere. It takes bravery, it takes courage to face our brain and our pain. But it's worth it. What is the alternative? To avoid it, to deflect, to distract, to deceive ourselves, to add more layers with our addictions on the initial pain and thus create long-term worse pain. Let's remember to have a long-term vision, guys. We are a bridge generation into this new earth. I wish I remembered that quote in the Bible. I don't know if it was Thomas or Matthew, but it basically said, the kingdom of God, heaven, is already here. But it's up to us to perceive it, i.e., Christ consciousness, the new earth. It's already here, guys. But we're blinded by our own pain, our own wounding, our own projections of our own trauma into the outer world. That's why it's so important to look inside. We cannot perceive with the eyes of compassion, empathy, and love if we cannot even bring that to our own inner wounding. We cannot perceive abundance if we're stuck in scarcity and survival mode. It is a matter of perception. So, do you seize this opportunity to grow your energy, to heal, to create a new timeline? Or do you consciously or unconsciously choose to feed the traumatic cycle that will only bring more suffering to you and others? Because hurt people hurt people. And there are people who've been in crazy circumstances and were still able to forgive. I wish I couldn't find that movie about the Rwandan genocide, where in the movie, the women were captive in this bathroom of this priest hiding behind a shelf. And this woman, she carried so much anger against the aggressors. At the end, she had a vision to choose. Is she going to perpetuate the cycle of aggression? Because she, in the end, was given in the prison the chance to beat her oppressor, her friend who had massacred all of her family. But she basically had the vision, do I align with the oppressor or do I choose differently? Do I choose to forgive? So even in the most dire circumstances, we're urged to make that choice. Do we perpetuate the violence against ourselves and others? Or do we choose a different path? I feel it's becoming less possible to ignore that choice. Because if we choose to deroute, go off alignment, the proverbial towers of the tarot will strike us with the universe and make us see that we're off path until we reroute again. So yeah, we have the free will to choose a path of suffering, but it will cause us more suffering, and it will cause us, perhaps even our soul, and it will dehumanize us. And it will put our own sovereignty into the hands of a tyrant, whether it's a state or an elite. I'm going to pull some cards for you in the next episode. This is what I have to share for this one. You know, I made a choice and I said, I want to grow, I want to evolve, I want to be, I want to create, I want to heal, I want to serve, I want to shine, and I want to love. It's my choice. We all make our choices. Let's remember that we have a choice. I love you. Charles and I have got your back, and I hope you have your own back too. See you for episode 15 coming up right after this one.